Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to thank TICA and our institution, SETA, and our director for organizing this conference. I think it's quite a timely event. And in Turkey now, foreign aid and development cooperation has been occupying the agenda of policymakers increasingly over the course of last years, we need to say. Turkey has been transformed from a recipient of foreign aid to a major donor. And in the morning, we listened to the Deputy Prime Minister and the head of TICA talking about the details of this transformation. And in this panel, we will look at conceptual issues. How can we conceptualize the global order? I will talk about the changes in global order, and I will try to link these changes, these shifts, to the changing nature of foreign aid and development cooperation. And we have valuable participants, panelists, and as the host, I will give maybe some of my time to them. I mean, we want to kind of hear their valuable ideas. But as a general framework, maybe we need to talk about the shift of global, maybe the epicenter of politics. People talk about various forms of global shift. Peter Dicken wrote a book on the global shift in the early 2000s. But after that, it increasingly came to the agenda of political science, economy. I'm a political economist, and I constantly listen to people talking about a global shift. For example, most recently, I was working on a study on China and the emergence of East Asia as a kind of power block, so to speak. And many, for example, political scientists, development economists, for example, especially the American tradition, they talk about the shift from the Atlantic axis to the maybe East Asian axis. We have important guests from Korea. The deputy president of KOICA is here, and we have representatives from JICA as well. So when we look at the transformation trajectory in East Asia, the increasing intensity of foreign aid and development cooperation has been an ingredient, a crucial ingredient of emerging powers. So the emerging power status of a country generally implies that you have a vibrant economy, you have a vibrant private sector and NGOs and aid institutions, and you build your political and economic capacity to reflect that domestic transformation to the first regional and then global order. So I think when we look at the transformation, I will use Turkey's case as a case study here, but I can see the same pattern when I look at the transformation in Turkey's foreign aid and development cooperation. Traditionally, as I say, during the Cold War years, Turkey was a net recipient of foreign aid. And we looked at, in the Cold War environment, we looked at the foreign aid, especially military aid, coming from the US and NATO alliance as a key kind of concept, as a key instrument that linked us to the Western world, the free world, so to speak. So it was a guarantee in that respect for maintaining cordial diplomatic and political relations as well. But especially after the end of the Cold War, this picture started to change, and the first challenge for the Turkish policymakers was the dissolution of the Soviet Empire and how to approach especially the Turkic states in Central Asia. So foreign aid became, it is not a coincidence that the development of TICA kind of gained speed after that, because it was the first major policy challenge that Turkey had to reply and to provide some form of technical aid, in terms of material support, education support, health support, and these aspects of soft power, which we use a lot these days in foreign policy. First, to Central Asia, the Balkans, Caucasia, which were seen as the natural kind of habitat of Turkey, natural immediate neighborhood of Turkey. So it started from there during the 1990s, and there was kind of a sporadic growth over the course of 1990s. It depended largely on the domestic kind of political and economic stability, because during 1990s, Turkey went through difficult periods. There were coalition governments, there were up and downs in the economy, and the dynamism in foreign aid and development cooperation is closely linked with your domestic economic dynamism. If you have sustainable growth, if you have a foreign trade surplus, for example, if you have dynamic foreign investors, if you have a strong Exim Bank, for example, who can provide credit, in return your private sector can go into new markets, then you can have a say in the global foreign aid market, so to speak. Yeah? So if you look at Turkey's transformation over the course of 1990s, I think it was a slow process because it was interrupted by financial crises in 1994, 1999, 2000, 2001. But once domestic stability was achieved after 2002, and I think that is a credit of the existing kind of government or series of governments, single-party governments, that domestic stability was successfully reflected into success in terms of extending foreign aid. In the morning, we have seen the numbers and figures, for example, that Turkey's foreign aid budget started from, I think, $61 million and went to over $3 billion. It still continues to expand, but the geographic scope as well, which started from the Balkans, the Central Asia, Caucasia, in which you can find ethnic or cultural proximity to the Turkish kind of nation. It started from there because, as I say, these were seen as the natural habitat, which is, for example, similar to South Korea, providing most of the, for example, foreign aid to East Asian region, for example, or Poland, providing most of the foreign aid to Eastern European or Baltic states, for example. So for many emerging powers or developing countries, we can say, the first instinct, the natural instinct of many countries is to start from the region that you see immediately around you in terms of history, politics, culture, and so on, and focus on your foreign aid activity as a geographic proximity. But as you develop economically as a major power, that is like the emerging power status. When you begin to kind of earn that status, which is similar to countries, the BRICS countries, for example, we can see Brazil, Russia, India, China. I mean, these are the Mint countries, the second generation emerging powers. When you start to kind of project your regional status to a global kind of actor, then your foreign aid perspective also widens. So we see the same kind of attitude in the transformation of Turkey's foreign aid, maybe attitude. For example, if you look at the countries that receive the most of Turkey's foreign aid budget these days, for example, Afghanistan. Okay, it is close to Central Asia, but normally it is not within the kind of community of Turkic-speaking kind of nations. Afghanistan takes quite a lot from Turkey's aid budget. Somalia, for example. Yemen. Yeah? These are countries in which, okay, you have some form of maybe cultural link, but these countries are in strong need of reconstruction. So these are countries that also need massive amounts of infrastructure investment. So Turkey focused its efforts, if I may say, onto those countries who are starting from scratch. Like Somalia, I mean, you don't even have an airport in which some statesman can come and land, for example. When Tayyip Erdogan was prime minister, he went there with a delegation and they had great difficulty in landing because there was no airport, no proper airport. I mean, now there is, for example. So Turkey made massive investment into Somalia, and Somalia is now given as an example of the Turkish model, in which you don't have many kind of bureaucratic wrangling like the UN system, for example. There is no delays or the reductions in the budgetary framework, which is more direct, which is more informal, which is more speedy, and you have more human kind of input in that, for example. So maybe we might talk about different models, but people began to speak about the Turkish model after Somalia, especially. In Yemen, the same. In Afghanistan, you can see a similar perspective. For example, I think there was a quote from the Prime Minister of Somalia. He was saying, if we require, for example, computers from a UN institution or an international institution, it will take maybe 2 years to arrive. And the number will be half or maybe 1/3 of what we require. But if we kind of demand it from Turkey, they will be here next week. So, I mean, there was a kind of different attitude to speed up the process. And in development issues, this speed is very important. And also human-to-human contact, trying to understand the real needs and to have a demand-based approach to foreign aid as well. What are those demands? Because in some countries, in some countries we see that there are different criteria. For example, following the EU example, for example, you have a certain criteria in your mind. Okay, I want to kind of promote democracy, human rights, whatever. I mean, it might be political criteria, other criteria, but applying them might be having an effect that limits your options. And that might have an impact on limiting the interaction between those who are in real need of development aid and yourself. So I think especially in countries in dire need of development assistance, adopting a need-based approach might be better fitting in taking speedy outcomes. And Turkey is trying to follow that. And I think in that respect, foreign aid is quite an important ingredient of foreign policy openings in many different regions, in many different human-based kind of enterprises, I will say, initiatives, so that the profile of the country, I mean, that reaches to a global level. And after that, I think there is no return. I mean, once you speak, once you kind of make investments, once you become a partner, for example, Somalia normally has we are giving it as an example, but TICA has many offices in Africa. They follow the openings of the Turkish diplomatic community, and they are opening now offices in Latin America as well. I talked to the TICA president. He was talking about that they were about to open an office in Mexico. For example, if you consider this, like 20 years ago, I mean, opening a foreign aid or development cooperation office in Mexico would be unthinkable for Turkey, because the scope of foreign policy, it was quite narrow. So it was like a narrow circle around Turkey's geographical proximity. Now it is, we can say, practically it's the globe. And for many emerging powers, I think, like Turkey, foreign aid and development cooperation is both an instrument that supports foreign aid, but it has also concrete aids, concrete support for the people on the ground. So, but once you get kind of in those global networks, after a while, I mean, it becomes maybe impossible to go back, because you form a lot of connections, you form a lot of links, you form institutions, you form schools, hospitals, and so on. After a while, it takes a life of its own. Those foreign policy, foreign aid initiatives. And I think Turkey's experience in the last decade constitutes a crucial example in that. Thank you.